Welcome back for the start of week 2, and we're going to get it going with more JavaScript and really talking about how these events can hook together and modify things that are on the web page for us so that we can make really fun interactive experiences. But before we can make fun interactive experiences, we need to make, you'll see. We'll make a more basic one first. So let's go to the main page or the desktop. And what I really want to do is get started with my counter example. Now my counter example file, open folder. Oops, let's just pick counter. We don't want to go in there. Yeah, so we're in the counter example. It's an empty folder, and we're going to have an index.html. I think we can also have a style.css and a script.js because we are going to be working with JavaScript as well. And in the HTML here, I'm going to call this my epic counter. And what are we going to be counting? Yeah, we'll think of something good. I'm going to give it an ID. So we're going to need to be able to both style this element to look kind of cool. And I want to draw parallels between how the way we style elements and the way we can modify them in JavaScript. It can look similar in a way. I really want to draw that sort of parallel. So I think I'm going to call this count. And I want to say the count is, we'll start at 1. And what I want to do is have buttons that go along with this. Button, I'm going to have a plus button and a minus button. I think that'll be just fine for me. And I need to run some sort of code when these exist or when these are clicked. So on click is the event I'm going to provide it. And I'm going to call up a custom function called add1. I'm going to make up this function. And if I'm doing add1 on the plus button, it only makes sense to do subtract1 on the second one. Subtract, there we go. Subtract1, add1. And yeah, I think we're ready to actually see this in action. So let's open it in our default browser. I'm going to bring it on over. We're zoomed in by quite a bit. So maybe let's go to 250. Okay, 300% looks good. And when we're working with JavaScript, remember we want to have our inspect element tool open. And we want to go to our console here. And what I want to do is see what happens when I click on these buttons. So if I click on the plus button, add1 is not defined. Okay, so we're going to need to create a function add1 for it to be run. It's not a built into JavaScript function. We're responsible for providing it. And minus subtract1 is not defined. All right, so we have both of these two. And I'm going to go into the script.js to define those functions. So function add1. Let's just do add1 first. And well, we're doing a counter example, so I'm going to create a variable for our count, like our current count number is 1. And what I want to do is count plus plus to increase it by 1. And let's see that value in the console log. I really like being able to see something so that I know when I'm clicking on this button, it is engaged with my code and it is actually working. So let's take a look at that and make sure that it is in fact working. It's still not defined. So this is where we need to go to our index. And well, if you remember when we're working with CSS, we need to link our CSS into the page. It's exactly the same with our JavaScript. So I'm going to provide this a source. I'm going to point it to the script. Oh, they're already suggesting that. That's good. And I'm going to save this. And I think when we come back again, we now have a number that can increase. So that's a really good sign. So yeah, that is a really good sign. So the next part is going to be a little bit interesting. I want to start by talking about this ID count. And yeah, if we're linking in our script, we should also link in our CSS. Oh, you even found it. That's crazy. I want to style this count. And in CSS, if I have an ID, I can select it using a hash. And let's give it a background color. I'm thinking, all right, it just knows I want Rebecca purple. You're right, I do. And we'll give it a color. I'm thinking just white will be fine. And we'll give it a bit of padding. Since it's so big already, let's just do 10. I think that'll look okay. Yeah, that looks all right. And so the way we select our CSS with this hash, the name of the ID, is going to be the same thing we want to do, it turns out, in the JavaScript. So I'm going to create a variable that we can use to represent our count element. Well, it's a paragraph tag, but we'll call it count element. And we need to access the DOM, the document object model, in order to get the element we want to select. And we have a variable built in called document. When our script.js is embedded in an HTML page, it is able to work with this document. If it's not related to HTML at all, we don't have access to this document. And in this document, I want to do Queryselector. It's cool that came up first. And what this lets us do, well, if you remember selectors from CSS, we're able to write pretty much the same thing. So I can select an ID by writing hash count. And that should access my ID for me. Just to make sure I'm getting this, let's console log the count element, just so we see that it's getting selected like we want. And if I come back and we look at this thing, it's currently null. So the reason why it's null is because this ID count, it gets put into the page after this script gets run. So we never selected it. So what I really want to do is just move, well, let's move it below the paragraph ID count so we can see this. Yeah, there it is. It's there now. Because this needs to be run after this. Otherwise, we don't have access to it. And I can move it to the bottom of my page. That's typically what I do with my scripts. Unless I have a good reason to have it up higher. Just put them at the bottom of our page and we're usually safe because any elements that we would need to exist should hopefully already exist. All right, so we still have that count. I can still increase this number. So the next piece to this puzzle is we have the element we want to change the text of. And there's a number of ways we can do that. But I want to say count element. And there's a lot of things built into it. But I think the easiest way for us to do this is going to be the inner. Okay, inner HTML allows us to give it brand new HTML for it. That's more than what we need right now. We just need to change the text. And with inner text, I can have it instead say the count is count. And what that is going to do is this number goes up. That's really nice. We still haven't done subtract one, but the logic is pretty much identical for subtract one, except minus minus. Oh, we need to call it that too. So subtract. So add and subtract both exist. We can go negative. Awesome. So yeah, hopefully this video has audio this time. That was really demoralizing. I'll tell you the story later. But anyway, have a fantastic day and look forward to the next video. I'm really excited to share it with you. Bye. Bye.